Welcome back. This is our third video for Chapter 7 about arrays. And in this video, we're going to talk about the concept of primitive versus object arrays. Later, we'll talk about processing them, using them as parameters and return values, and sorting and searching. So, quick review. What's the difference between primitive variables and reference variables? Well, let's start with primitives. In this situation, the red text here shows the declaration and initialization of a primitive variable named I. And so our conceptual picture is that we have a box of memory out there someplace. We call I, it's at a certain address, and the integer 35 is stored inside of it. So the variable itself holds the value that's been assigned to the variable. Again, that's a primitive. In a reference situation, so now I've got a string object, my variable actually holds the address of the object in memory. So my string object exists somewhere in memory. There's an address associated with its location. My variable s just holds the address where that object is. So that difference also applies to arrays. So in an array of primitives, each element of the array is what? Well, a primitive value, so the values are actually stored in the array. If I have an array of booleans, each element of the array is actually a boolean. On the other hand, if I have an array of objects, every one of the elements in the array is what? Well, it's a reference that actually points to an object. So the values aren't really in the array, just the addresses where they are is in the array. Here's a picture of a primitive array. This is an array of 50 floats named grades, so this is one of the figures from the texts. And all the values are stored directly in the array. So there's 50 slots, 50 floats. They're actually stored in the array. On the other hand, if I have an array of strings, like this array of 5 strings, the array actually holds references. So each of the items in the array is the address of some object in memory. The objects aren't really there, right, in the array, just their addresses are. So that has an implication in terms of default values. Let's take a look at an array. How many ints are there in this array? If you said 100, you're right, because I've created an array named ARRA, array A, an array of ints, 100 values, and our default values say that those are all initialized to 0. What about this? Here's an array of p images. How many p image objects are in this array? The answer is not 5,000. The answer is there are no p-image objects in that array yet. There's room for 5,000 p-image references, but the objects haven't been created yet. All the values in this array are null. So we need to make sure that we create the objects in an object array in some manner before we use them. And that's probably going to be something that will trip you up on occasion. But if you don't allocate and create those objects first, you'll get what's called a null pointer exception. Okay, next up, how to process arrays using a for loop.